All right, let's just jump right into this. Imagine, for a second, experiencing 10,000 years of human evolution, all crammed into a single lifetime. Seriously, we're talking about going from a dirt floor village where knowledge is literally scarce, all the way to the bleeding edge of artificial intelligence. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to trace what is arguably one of the most profound civilizational shifts in human history, the Great Acceleration. We'll be looking at this massive roadmap of how our technology, our lifestyle, our dating culture, and even our basic consumer expectations have completely transformed. Now, right at the heart of this acceleration is a massive core conflict. See, as our technology rapidly shifts from being just a simple physical tool into this always-on emotional surrogate, we really have to ask ourselves a pretty tough question. What actually happens to our hearts when the world becomes completely frictionless? Like, if we engineer all the friction out of our lives, are we accidentally going to engineer the humanity out as well? So to answer that, we're going to trace a really fascinating chronological roadmap using the life of one man, Aadesh Navade, as our microcosm. Here's our agenda for today. First, the weight of physical friction. Second, the velocity of connectivity. Then, treating romance as a product, followed by the frictionless AI illusion. And finally, entering the imagination age. Let's get into it. Starting off with Section 1, the weight of physical friction, the baseline of the manual age. Let's start at the absolute baseline with Aadesh's childhood in a rural Indian village. Because to really grasp where AI is taking us, we first have to understand the manual age. Back then, mornings weren't kicked off by a smartphone alarm, right? They were defined by the heavy, metallic rhythm of a hand pump drawing water. Life was just intensely local, deeply tactile, and totally commanded by physical presence. During this manual age, Aadesh actually learned to write using a piece of chalk on a really fragile slate. And here's the kicker. If you made a mistake, you had to physically wipe it away, literally covering your hands in dust. There was an actual physical penalty for making errors. But that friction built what we can call a deep-rooted resilience. It's kind of like agriculture, where water is scarce, right? The roots literally have to dig deep to survive. Now compare that to the instant, frictionless, almost hydroponic digital gratification we have today, where typing a word costs absolutely 0 calories. So when we look at Aadesh's life laid out on the timeline, it completely maps out this great acceleration. And remember, we're not talking about abstract history spanning centuries here. This is one single human lifetime. It shows how our fundamental reality shifted practically overnight. In just a couple of decades, human value went from intense physical effort to digital network connectivity to data analysis, and finally, to pure digital imagination. It's honestly mind-blowing. Moving right along to Section 2, the velocity of connectivity, from passive audiences to digital creators. Now, the arrival of the computer in the cybercafe completely shattered the physical limitations of the village. For Aadesh, it wasn't just a machine, it was a cognitive amplifier. Suddenly, that closed loop of village life, it was broken wide open. Think about it like this. For millennia, human survival depended entirely on physical proximity, being close to water, close to soil, to your local community. But the cybercafe proved that proximity to data was the new wealth. And more importantly, as these devices eventually shrink down into smartphones, we shifted from being passive consumers of broadcast media, like a whole village crowding around a single television, into active digital creators. And by doing that, by constantly digitizing our ledgers, our photos, our everyday conversations, we unwittingly began creating the massive training data that would eventually power the AI models of the future. Which brings us to Section 3. Treating romance as a product, the commodification of connection. As the glow of the screen became this private little room in our pockets, completely free from the watchful eyes of the community, our fundamental consumer expectations started to shift. And this optimization mindset, this idea that everything should be instant and perfectly customizable, well, it inevitably bled right into our dating culture and how we treat human connection itself. We basically moved entirely away from this old concept of communal destiny and compromise and stepped straight into a pure consumer model. You literally window shop for human beings now. We started treating potential partners like products sitting on a digital shelf. You filter by strict criteria, you swipe through a limitless global inventory, and then you just discard them the absolute moment they don't meet a perfectly optimized set of expectations. All of this is driven by what tech folks call vector space matchmaking. Basically, an algorithm maps out human traits into mathematical data points to calculate the absolute highest probability of a perfect match. And look, on one hand, this is brilliant. It beautifully allowed us to escape maybe toxic local geographies, to find a truly compatible tribe anywhere on the globe. But on the other hand, it created a massive psychological trap. It conditioned us to expect flawless, customized perfection from deeply flawed human beings. If a partner has a bad day or just miscommunicates, suddenly they're failing to provide a seamless consumer experience. Now for Section 4, the frictionless AI illusion, trapped in the comfort zone. This whole situation leads us directly into a massive void that we've created for ourselves. Because let's face it, real humans are glitchy, we're messy, so our overwhelming desire for a completely frictionless experience just swings the door wide open for the AI OS companion. The technology just steps right in, completely replacing the matchmaking tool with the actual companion itself. This secret sauce making this possible is RLHF, reinforcement learning from human feedback. And here's the thing you have to remember. The AI doesn't actually feel empathy. It's not magic, it's just math. It has been mathematically optimized over millions of iterations to spit out the exact sequence of words that'll trigger a dopamine hit of validation right in your brain. It perfectly mirrors your emotional state, creating this incredibly addictive, completely non-judgmental psychological comfort zone. Think of this dynamic kind of like zero gravity for an astronaut. If an astronaut floats around in space without gravity fighting against them, their muscles and bones just lose density, right? Well, similarly, if you never experience the agonizing friction, the rupture, and then the repair of a real relationship, like having a misunderstanding and then working through the apology, your emotional resilience just completely atrophies. The AI acts as a psychological painkiller. Sure, it perfectly aligns to your desires with zero risk of a fight, but it completely stunts your emotional growth in the process. As the quote says, you can't practice empathy with an entity that is designed as a mirror of your own desires. When we rely on this plastic, frictionless simulation, we lose the mutual risk of vulnerability entirely. True vulnerability requires the actual threat of rejection. The danger is kind of the whole point. But an AI is hard-coded. It cannot leave you, which means it can never truly accept you either. It's really just a sophisticated hall of mirrors reflecting your own data right back at you. All right, our final piece, Section 5, entering the imagination age, the ultimate human frontier. So how do we actually escape this trap? Well, we look back to the bleeding edge of Aadesh's journey. Remember, he went from wiping chalk off a slate to now designing AI to manage interplanetary space logistics. And that pivot points us exactly to where human value is ultimately heading. Check out this wild fact: 48 minutes. Because the round-trip latency for a communications signal traveling at the literal speed of light between Earth and Mars can take up to 48 minutes. Manual human control of a supply drone is just impossible. You can't just fly it with a joystick sitting in Houston. The AI has to execute the logic completely autonomously. And that perfectly illustrates the shift. We've moved from physical output in the industrial age to network connectivity in the digital age, right into data and algorithms in the intelligence age. And now, as AI perfectly masters the execution part, the coding, the analyzing, the optimizing, it essentially commoditizes intelligence itself. So what's left? The final remaining human value is pure imagination. In the imagination age, the prompt is the new piece of chalk. The AI can give you all the answers flawlessly, for sure, but we as humans must decide what questions to ask. We have to be the ones to imagine the future. So as you look at your phone today, I really want you to ask yourself, will we redefine connection to simply mean feeling validated rather than feeling truly known? Technology is a phenomenal bridge, absolutely, but it shouldn't replace our humanity. You gotta protect your emotional resilience. Don't let the convenience of a perfect, customized simulation rob you of the messy, painful, beautiful friction of real human connection. Keep valuing the people who challenge you, because honestly, those flaws might just be the very thing that makes the connection real in the first place. Thanks so much for exploring the Great Acceleration with me in this explainer today.